Clavicular appeared to be gesture maxing after he got frame mogged by Andrew Callahan of Channel 5 News. Congratulations, you just heard the most terminally online thing that I've ever said. And the reason I'm using all this Looksmaxxing vernacular is because we're talking about Clavicular, the titular figurehead of the Looksmaxxing movement. He's blown up over the last year, giving tips and tricks on how to Looksmax, look better, bone smashing, if you will. He's also been known to meth max a little bit, and yeah, that's kind of exactly what it sounds like. And there's a lot more to understanding this, which again, I'll go over in the video essay that I plan to make on him. But today we're focusing on that interview that he walked out of, because he ended up hosting the entire hour leading up to before he walked out. And it is unbelievably entertaining to watch this dude make a fool of himself. Now, before we watch this, just a quick two things. First off, I'm going to say outright what I believe here, which is that Clavicular is not really putting on an act. And what I specifically mean by that is I don't think he knows how dumb he looks. I've heard from quite a few people that they think that he is putting on an act, and I think this interview has completely solidified my belief that this guy is just like this. That will become apparent as I'm showing you the highlights from this live stream, but secondly, if you're new here, hey, consider subscribing. Thanks to all you already, we've got this really cool shiny silver play button over here, which I have yet to nail to the wall, but will do so. But if you end up enjoying this content, want to get it out in front of more people, give this video a like, perchance a hype. And regardless of if you do either of those things, thank you for watching. Now, this is the full interview leading up to before he walked out. It's on Clav's own channel. I'll leave a link in the description for it. The worst interview I've ever had. If you have the time to sit through the hour, it is worth it. Personally, I just found it incredibly entertaining to see this play out. And I think the best way to get started in showing you guys the highlights is to actually show you the end, the reason that this kind of blew up. Additional footnote, this interview is conducted by Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan. It's just the name of the YouTube channel, and yes, that will be important. And here's a clip of the very end of the interview that blew up on LSF here.
When you wake up every single morning and you take a look in the mirror, you're 100% satisfied with every single thing. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, dude. All right, well, I guess that's just, if you want to be completely disingenuous, that's fine with me. I guess there's just no point to continue.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right.
Yep.
All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, bro.
Thanks for having us.
No worries.
Yo, crap, is everything okay?
Yeah, no, everything's fine. We're all good.
We're all good?
Yeah.
You guys good?
So as you saw there, Clav appeared to be in complete and utter disbelief at the idea that Andrew Callahan here wakes up every morning and is comfortable in his own skin, more or less. A lot of people are saying that he ended this interview and was frustrated because Andrew did not ask any questions in regard to his own physique, his own appearance, and how he could improve and Looksmax to improve that. I think there are a few points in this interview that point to that being possible. Now, there's one other clip, again, towards the very end of this that I want to show you guys now, because it'll be important when we watch some of the other highlights that I'm talking about. And that's Clav saying that he was not asked a single Looksmaxxing question throughout their entire hour-long interview.
I applaud you for that, but not one, question about Looksmaxxing?
There's been so many questions about Looksmaxxing. I probably asked you about Looksmaxxing like 40 times. I just don't know the specific science. I'm not in the community.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, if you were to ask about, like, maybe something in regards to hair loss, like, there's really nothing.
Yeah, sure, hair loss.
You see what I mean?
Telling
It's
me
like,
what to, you're trying to
I'm
get
telling
me
you
to,
what to ask.
And that clip ends up leading into what I just showed you guys. But as you saw towards the end there, you could see that he was eyeballing Andrew's hairline. It was asking about like balding, things like that, which is another one of those points where it's like, okay, it seems like that is something that he really wanted Andrew to ask that he wasn't. But you see the pushback from Andrew saying, no, I like asked you about Looksmaxxing like 40 times during this interview. And he's not lying. Like roughly 60 to 70% of this interview consists of him asking about Looksmaxxing. I watched this entire thing twice. It is really strange that Clav makes this claim when it's just bullshit. But now let's jump to the beginning of this interview. Towards the beginning here, he ends up revealing that during COVID, he was around 13 years old. It's like middle school into high school. But more importantly, this kind of sets the stage in noticing that Clav is pretty antisocial, and he has some very interesting perspectives on relationships with people, women in particular, and we'll see a bit more of that down the road here.
Your social experience in school, though, how was that?
I mean, what age range are we talking about?
I guess like right around 13, 14 is what I'm thinking.
Well, that would have been during the pandemic, so I was in online school.
How do you think that being in online school, like, you know, transformed your experience during that time?
Well, obviously you're not interacting with anyone. So
Yeah.
You're just like ladaring.
But I mean, was that the time window that you sort of fell into the Looksmaxxing community?
Around that time, actually, yeah.
What do you think?
Right at the tail end of the pandemic, actually.
What do you think like initially appealed to you about it?
Well, it just seemed like when I first started lifting, and then I got really into, you know, pharmacology and steroid usage, I was like, this is like literally a video game cheat code, is what it almost feels like. And it seemed like so ridiculous to try to play the game fair when I had access to all these things.
What was the first kind of thing that you tried out? Was it
Test.
Test.
So as you heard there, during, I would say, some pretty formative years, Clav was dealing with the pandemic, was doing online schooling. And this is also around the time that he kind of fell more deeply into this Looksmaxxing community and started focusing on it. And you see at the end of the clip there, he mentions that he started taking tests, that being, of course, testosterone. Now, it's going to become very apparent that Clav is very antisocial. I think he himself has even mentioned that he believes he's on the spectrum.
Percentage of people on the autism spectrum is quite low. I'd imagine it's around 1% of the population.
Are you on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that that will become very apparent to people watching. And that's not even a dig at the guy. It's just very clear that the way he engages with the world is a bit off. And you also probably heard this acronym, he said LIDAR. That stands for laying down and rotting. He brings it up later down the road as well. In tandem with that, what I heard, which I thought was pretty interesting, was that he started to do all of this stuff while he was doing that online schooling, which means that he wasn't in person with these people. And I guess that kind of goes back and forth on that making sense with this idea that he may be struggling with body dysmorphia. A lot of people that are part of this Looksmaxxing community and are very deep into it, and this kind of just goes around for anything, like models, for instance, are struggling with body dysmorphia. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know the stats on it. I used to be an acting coach, and I also did a tad bit of modeling, and other more successful models were very ripped. And I knew a few of them that were very cognizant of the fact that they were dealing with body dysmorphia. In turn, them focusing so much on it and dealing with that, it made them stay in shape to a much better degree than someone like myself. But at the end of the day, still a mental illness that was impacting them daily. It seems like Clav lost out on the, you know, in-person social interactions that he had. And in turn, when it was all just online, that maybe incentivized him more to get into the Looksmaxxing community, or maybe there's no correlation at all. Up to you guys on how you want to take that. But I do find it interesting that around the same time that he was doing online schooling is when he really dove into this. And you're going to hear his perception on social engagements, relationships, even intimate relationships, and their lack of value. But moving on to the next segment, very early on in this interview as well, Andrew brings up bone smashing, a Looksmaxxing question. It kind of is a topic that comes up, and Clav talks about it a bit.
The first thing that caught my eye was the bone smashing.
Okay.
Because
A
I was
lot of people are
worried
interested
about
about.
Because I saw some people responding saying like, oh, in time, one day you're going to have like jaw issues. Do you think that's...
Yeah, because I don't even bone smash my jaw.
Oh, okay, my bad. How does it work?
Cheekbones. And
cheekbones.
it's just like, it's so silly that people want to talk about bone smash. I think it's just because it's like you hear it and it's so crazy.
Yeah.
But that's not even really like one of the main things that I would, you know, advocate for or promote, or that really give people the most results. It's one of the methods that I talk about, but it's just what gets brought up the most frequently in interviews. If you ask me seriously, I mean, what's the best way to look max? I would tell you about leanness. I wouldn't tell you about bone smashing.
Got you. So staying low weight.
Yeah, staying extremely low body fat.
And what are some of the easiest ways to do that besides just creating a caloric deficit?
Well, being in a GLP-1 will help you maintain that deficit a lot easier, right? Because it's going to deal with a lot of hunger signaling.
So truly, first 10 minutes of this interview, they're already talking about this bone smashing, they're talking about leanness, and they go in depth for like another minute here talking about that. So again, Just completely goes against Clav's claim that they were never talking about Looksmaxxing. And in regard to Clav and his knowledge about GOPs or anything like this when he's talking about leanness, he brings up a lot of pharmaceuticals. And it seems like he's done a good deal of research. He's obviously not gone to college for this, or I'm not even necessarily knocking him for not going to college. I didn't do that either. But he's a young dude, and he talks with a great deal of authority on these subjects when he's not a doctor, when he's not any of these things. He's just done his research from, as he's claimed, studies and online forums. I don't know how often he notates or directly sources any of these, so, take that as you will. But he brings up, appetite suppressants, or that he is taking different stimulants, or he has in the past, which will be also talked about later with his meth maxing. But at the same time that he's talking about this stuff and providing information, it's also interesting to see that he does seem to recognize the health hazards that come with taking some of these pharmaceuticals that he references.
Are you concerned about any adverse health effects?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, if you go about like an HGH improperly, you could deal with, potentially, becoming diabetic, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're pinning GH and then spamming a ton of carbs, that's horrible for your blood glucose levels. Or if you're taking a huge amount of aromatase inhibitors, that could lead to ED, that could potentially be neurotoxic, give you mood swings. So yeah, you really need to be extremely well researched when doing this stuff. That's why I'm very careful about when I talk about these kind of things, because I want to be as comprehensive as possible. Yeah. To not leave any nuance on the table and try to clarify as much as possible. I would say, in a funny way, a lot more people will actually end up detrimenting themselves, because people these days are lazy. They don't want to research. They don't want to actually do things properly, take the steps that are actually necessary to have success.
I just found this to be a bit interesting, because he makes mention as as a matter of fact, most people that are going to be doing any of this or trying any of this are probably just going to hurt themselves more than this actually ends up benefiting them. And I find that interesting because Clav is a streamer. He is mainly a live streamer, and his live streams consist of, doing segments where he's learning about these things or sharing this information that he's learned with the Looksmaxxing community doing this. But a large majority of what you see too is just other Looksmaxxers that he's working with, or them going to clubs, doing yacht parties with a bunch of women, and just mogging on each other, just trying to flex their appearance over one another and get laid. There's clips of this dude keeping his audio on while having sex. There was a clip of him where I believe he got banned because he had a girl go under the table and suck him off while live on stream. The difference in the type of attention that you're going to get between sharing this kind of information and just being very salacious and having a bunch of women and that kind of thing, those are attracting to, what seem to be different audiences, but realistically, the people that are going to be sticking around are those people that want to, catch babes and do all this stuff. So I don't really know if he's actually giving this information to people that are going to pay attention. He's providing this information to people that aren't going to care about doing the research and are probably going to hurt themselves. That's just a Quinthio theory. I don't know. I just feel like that's more to the detriment of the people that are watching his content, and he seems to not recognize that, or maybe he doesn't believe that himself. Now, towards the end of this, admittedly, Andrew ends up asking a question that just kind of comes out of left field, but it does end up providing a very interesting answer from Clav. And this has to do with social interaction and making friends, things like that. Admittedly, I am siding with Clav that it kind of appeared to have just come out of nowhere, but I'll just let the clip play.
I think people are scared to make friends now too. Screen time's at an all-time high. People aren't really going out. Community's kind of in collapse. Less people have real friends.
I don't know the relevance of that.
What do you mean?
What's the relevance of that? It's
what's kind of what you were just talking about.
Not at all.
Wanting to ascend and finding your place in the world, SMV.
I was just talking about pharmacology.
Oh yeah, but I'm kind of getting into your goal is to help people ascend, right?
Yeah, but I mean, what's the value there? I mean,
in engaging with people in real life?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not that many people that are worth interacting with, I would say.
What do you mean?
Most people are extremely jester, I would say.
They're funny, or they're just
Just have completely misprioritize lives. I would say the average person that you meet who's like an enjoyer of sports, who drinks beer, for example, like, you know, let's go have a beer at the pub and watch Sunday football. Like, that's the worst thing that you could do. Like, you should be on PubMed reading various different studies on how you could Looksmax.
You don't think there's any value in like social interactions with people?
I wouldn't say people in general. I'd say that there's certain people that you could certainly learn from, but the average person that you encounter is literally like lidaring, watching like a baseball game.
So you think most of humanity is sort of like enslaved to these consumer habits that prevent them from ascending?
Yeah, I would say that's correct.
This specific moment is very much reminding me of Will Smith's son when he's talking about how he prefers to have older friends because he wants to talk about the socioeconomic state of the world.
I go around sometimes and I hang out with other people that are my age, and they're just kind of just selfie. I'm just like, dude, like, oh my God, like, can we talk about like the political and economic state of the world right now?
Why are you drinking out with your friends watching a sports game when you could be on PubMed researching an article about how to Looksmax? And the thing is, I don't think he's bullshitting. I think he genuinely means that, even though he's going out to yacht parties and doing this because, you know, that's him being successful. So he'll find a way to justify that. But that genuinely just sounds so corny. But you can hear how confident he is in that. You can kind of see a bit of a difference in kind of like, I don't know, valuation of ideals between Andrew and Clav. If you know any of Andrew's other previous content, he's an interviewer. He loves to interview a ton of people. He'll go to big events like raves or rallies, things like that, and just interview a ton of people. He is very interested in hearing a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different people, and that's kind of how he goes through life. I'm kind of on Andrew's side in that, where I think that people are intrinsically, for the most part, very interesting. And although not everything is important and valuable for your day-to-day life and improving that, it is in some long-term sense just very valuable to have this wealth of understanding of the people around you. Clav, on the other hand, is solely focused on Looksmaxxing and in improving your self-worth, ascending. And so for him, a lot of people, like for most people, a lot of people that you end up dealing with in your life are not going to be important to you. You realistically have a core group of friends that is like, I don't know, 10, 15 people max. And then most people have, you know, group of their family that they're very close with, and that's about it. Most other people, especially for like a public figure like Clav, are just not important to him. They're not useful to him, and they're not really useful to us. We just don't really say that. All that to say, he's not necessarily wrong with that valuation, but it comes from what seems to be a very cold place. And he's like, this is just not valuable to me. And it comes off extremely transactional. Very interested to hear what you guys think, but I do think it kind of makes sense from Clav's perspective why he answered it that way. But it also very much shows that he's quite a bit antisocial. And this leads into one of my favorite parts of this interview, where they start talking about like dating and stuff. And Clav doesn't really see the value in dating women for the most part. You're going to hear him talk about it a lot. Some people have compared him or have said that he's like a part of the Manosphere, that he's like a red pill content creator. I just recently watched the Manosphere Netflix documentary, and it's very clear that he doesn't fall in line with the same ideals and beliefs as most of the Manosphere. I wouldn't consider him being a part of that. All that to say, he has a very interesting thought process on dating a girl and like taking her to a bowling alley.
You know, for example, I think about what normies were doing, and I was talking about this on my stream the other day. Say you were to do like a bowling date with a girl, and you weren't streaming it, like that's just the most ridiculous.
Well, what about like connecting with her because like you like her or something like that? You know, like maybe you want to start a family.
But where's the ROI in that?
What's that?
Like, where's the ROI?
Sorry, what's ROI?
Return on investment.
I mean, maybe you have kids and you can mold your kid into like a Tiger Woods type, like little golf player or something, and then he could provide for you. So when you get old, you don't gotta go to a nursing home, and he can like make sure you're taken care of.
Just leech off your kid, like you
no,
know, those,
like you want when
those
you're,
people who put the kids on the TikTok live, like
I get what you're saying.
you know what I mean? Like that's just comical.
So the main goal of Looksmaxxing is not to get girls; it's to feel good about yourself.
No, it's just to be successful in general. It's not about feeling good. It's about real results. And this is a completely objective thing. This isn't my opinion, and it never has just been a subjective thing. It's very, very well researched that in interviews, there's a huge bias towards good-looking people. In dating, obviously, a huge bias towards good-looking people. So objectively, you could hate me as a content creator, but realize like the value in what I'm talking about.
Taking a girl bowling? What's the ROI on that? I may have bowled a perfect 300, but am I getting head? Jokes aside, Clav is very clearly work-oriented. He is not interested in the ladies outside of it being good for entertainment. It's just the way that he talks about it, it is so clear that he did not get to socialize a ton or something. He's talked about this a bit before, I think I mentioned it earlier, but he's infertile because of what he's done with the Looksmaxxing stuff, with the chemicals that he's used, the pharmaceuticals. He's infertile.
Right now, I am infertile, but I'm not able to have a kid right now. But if I wanted to, there's a protocol I can put in place to be immediately good again.
Wait, why are you infertile right now?
It's just like a negative feedback loop when you're not needing to produce testosterone anymore because your body realizes, okay, we're getting it from an exogenous
So you're not producing
source.
any testosterone naturally?
No.
None?
No.
And I think that the stuff that he has been on has kind of ruined a good chunk of his libido, and so he uses other drugs to improve it while he's on camera doing this stuff. He's also of the very firm belief that him being sober is bad for the camera, so most of the time he isn't to be entertaining. Just a very interesting glimpse into how this guy is operating, and you can also hear he has this cognitive dissonance about talking about how Looksmaxxing improves not only in his words, and I mean, there is research for this, but objectively, improve your odds of landing an interview, landing a job from an interview, or the dating scene. Being more attractive helps you more with dating. He says it a lot throughout this interview that Looksmaxxing is not about pulling women and slaying puss. But then multiple times he's like, yeah, you know, I'm happy because I was working with these people, or like these people were watching my content, and then they're out here slaying. It is a huge aspect of what he brings up. And even the two core principles of it, or like the two objective truths about it, are that if you're attractive, it increases your success rate with dating and increases your success rate with landing jobs. Half of what Looksmaxxing is catching babes. So it's just a bit strange to me that he seems to not recognize that, or is not willing to accept that that is a huge part of why people are doing the Looksmaxxing. Next up, and this is just a bit of a small thing, but he answers some questions just flat out wrong, or like he seems to miss the main goal of the questions that he's being asked. In this instance, Andrew's trying to ask him what he was doing before the Looksmaxxing stuff, and he just doesn't answer it like that. He just answers this like he was asked, what did you do at the start of Looksmaxxing?
Growing up, what did you enjoy doing the most before all this stuff? Like, were you ever a sports guy? Were you into like science, computers, video games?
I mean, I would just mostly like Ladar on my PC.
That's a video game?
No, like lay down and rot.
Okay, like basically doom scrolling before there was smartphones.
No, it wasn't like doom scrolling. Like it was actually productive stuff that I was doing. Like I was reading.
Cool. What kind of stuff were you reading?
I was reading different forum posts, different studies, just whatever research you can think of.
About Looksmaxxing and developing your aesthetic?
Looksmaxxing, bodybuilding, all that kind of stuff.
Were you unhappy with how you looked at the time?
Yeah, of course.
Now, this could just be as easy as he just misunderstood the question, but it happens a lot where it just seems like he really wants to be taken seriously or looked at as an intelligent dude. And so he brings up that he was researching or you know, reading research papers, browsing forums, anything like this. Like he wants to completely separate himself from anything else, just solely focused on this. And maybe he's being truthful about that. Moving on though, this is one of my favorite traits about Clavvicular, or at least the Looksmaxxing community at whole. It appears that whenever you do something good or do something a lot, if you just add maxing to the end of it, that seems to be a thing to do. Andrew is talking to him about, you know, how he was communicating with people, and Clavvicular mentioned that he was using Discord a lot.
Did you find that engaging with people online as opposed to in real life helped kind of ease some of that social anxiety because you didn't have to deal with so much like in-person immediacy?
Yeah, like Discord maxing was probably one of the better things to do because you could actually find like people who have the same interests as you, and you're never going to encounter people with the same niche interests like Looksmaxxing. like you will on internet forums.
Honestly, I think I'm going to start picking this up myself, because instead of, saying, oh, I'm having an issue, pissing way too much during the day, it's probably a medical condition. No, brother, I'm piss maxing. I'm simply a piss maxer. Making slop content, I'm milk maxing. Jumping a bit further down into the interview though, and this was also brought up earlier, was alcohol consumption. And the fact that it's bad for you, don't do it. You should be on WebMD, searching up some research documents about Looksmaxxing. It's a bit of a contradiction because Clavicular drinks a lot on stream. He takes quite a few drugs on stream. There was even a bit where I was tempted to make a video because he was like using ketamine a lot, constantly on stream. He seems to have gotten better at that, but point is, he brings up this contradiction, notices that he's being a bit hypocritical, and then proceeds to justify why that's the case for him, because he's a streamer. He needs to be entertaining.
Because the way that I think about it is, being super results driven, right? So like actually being able to talk to girls, potentially like, get a girl to go home with you, like that's an example of, okay, maybe the oxidative stress could be justified because you got the success of, slaying a girl, for example.
Yeah.
But I don't really think that people should be drinking and doing recreationally for the most part. And I know that would appear super hypocritical because I do it a good amount, but it's just something that I utilize for my work, for my content, because I can't really like function around people too well or be super entertaining in my sober state, I think.
What do you find help you the most?
Pregabalin, stimulants.
Now, it does seem hypocritical because it is. And his justification is that, he gets to let loose. He can't really interact like the way he does in streams and whatnot unless he isn't sober, which is funny because you usually hear that from someone when you perform an intervention and are trying to convince them to go to rehab. I can't hang out with friends if I'm not drinking alcohol because I'm less fun. And while to some degree that is true, I think a lot of people feel that because it reduces your inhibitions or whatever the exact terminology is, but that is a complete and utter cope. The fact that you need to consume these drugs to perform in the correct way in these public situations is a cope. It is something you can absolutely learn. You do not need the crutch of a drug to do this. And it's interesting to see Clav has kind of fallen victim to that fallacy, that he needs to consume these pharmaceuticals to be successful as a streamer. You also heard the fact that he takes stimulants. He talks about why he does that. And then this also leads into him talking about his meth maxing.
I began blowing up on social media and I wanted to ascend in a very short time frame. So I was meth maxing to try to lean out as much as possible in a short duration of time. Like when people hear like, they assume it's like a guy smoking out of a pipe, but 10 milligrams of is quite similar to the average prescription.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that conversation about like lean versus heroin, how it was normalized to like sip lean, but then it was, people would get shade thrown at them for doing Oxycontin or heroin, but it's still chemically similar. So
Yeah.
the same thing with that.
Well, yeah, no, what I'm doing is really not like, not trying to like justify my usage or anything, because I stopped doing it. Like it's quite terrible, but that nuance was never something that was included in the headlines, because like meth maxing sounds so funny that it's like a headline.
Well, he's right. Meth maxing as the headline is objectively the funniest thing that you could do. I also think that nuance is missed because you were taking meth. And sure, it is different than, using a spoon or like a meth pipe to do this. And he makes mention that like most meth, is a bunch of street bikers cooking this up that are really stupid. It's not like the Walter White, 99.8% pure shit. But when you start going down that line of reasoning, it kind of sounds like you're justifying the use of it and saying that, well, there is a correct meth to use. There is a meth that if you use it, it's going to better your health, which I don't think most news networks or pretty much anyone making an article about this are wanting to be caught dead suggesting. Maybe that nuance is important. They kind of blur out or they completely mute out the sound of different drugs that they're talking about, like the full name for meth. I think they were also talking about that it was chemically similar to like a stimulant that you use like methylphenidate, which is one that I use. I think there's an important distinction distinction there. I'm not personally a pharmacologist. I don't know the difference. So maybe I'm just completely talking out of my ass. But he himself says that he shouldn't have been taking it and that it was a bad thing and he doesn't recommend doing it. So again, it just feels like a bit of cognitive dissonance. He's like, why didn't people talk about this nuance? Even though, even looking back now himself, he's saying he shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. Maybe the nuance is just interesting, but it seems like he almost feels like if that nuance was included, it wouldn't have been looked at as harshly, even though he himself looks back on it negatively now. Next up, Andrew talks to him about, what the goal of Looksmaxxing is. And Clav gives a very interesting answer. We're also going to see how there is this apparent possible way to achieve a 10 on the scale for Looksmaxxing, 10 out of 10 being the highest. And you find out that this journey of Looksmaxxing is endless. There is no end to it, but apparently you're supposed to be able to do stuff after you've ascended, after you have completed your Looksmaxxing journey, which is finding a partner and finding a successful job.
In what sense? Like, what do you think are the main things that men are suffering from in 2026?
Economic struggle, lack of success in the dating market, hypergamy, stuff like that.
But your idea is to sort of withdraw from the dating market to an extent and pursue self-improvement in a way to ascend in a way that doesn't put you in last place.
I think you're going to be wasting your time entering the dating market until you are maximized.
And what, in career and aesthetic?
In every metric, yeah, really.
I know you hate talking about politics, and the last thing I want to do is trap you in a politics rabbit hole, but you mentioned that Looksmaxxing isn't political. There is an association in the press with Looksmaxxing and the sort of right-wing manosphere.
A lack of success.
Once you reach like maximum mog levels, maximum aesthetic, like when you become a true 10, at that point,
then you get to do whatever you really feel is the path for you.
Has anybody reached full ascension?
Ascending is kind of like an ongoing process. Like,
is there any 10s out there, like people who have?
No.
Really?
No.
Will there ever be a sort of messiah?
Not with the technology we have now.
What do you mean? Like the methods would have to improve to the point where like scientific evolution would have to precede that.
Yeah, more so like just surgical intervention, and who knows. So I'm really not going to predict or like get into like what sort of science is going to come in the future.
I included 2 clips. The second one has jumped very far ahead towards the end, but I wanted to show you this idea with the Looksmaxxing stuff and ascending. There isn't, this actual endpoint, or at least it's not scientifically possible yet to reach this full ascension, to be a 10 out of 10, which when I'm hearing that sounds a lot like the body dysmorphia that I've seen from other friends of mine when they talk about this stuff, how they are reaching towards a goal that is entirely unobtainable. The goalposts are always being pushed out further and further, and they're never going to reach that. And if you can recognize that, and if you can enjoy the journey in the process and getting there, great, awesome. But if that journey and that process is taking away or reducing your quality of life in other ways, then that does end up being an issue. And it almost seems like Clav is completely oblivious to that part. And maybe he is enjoying the entertainment side of this stuff. I think that there is a core part of this that is just missing the entire, self-confidence and the huge role that it has in all of these different, sectors that he's talking about dating or about, landing a good interview. Like you don't have to be super attractive if you're really fucking funny, if you're very confident in who you are. Shit, that's how I got married. But that confidence brings you a very long way as well. And yes, if there are ways to improve yourself physically too, why not go to the gym, these things? But now we're getting into, pharmaceutical use and these different things, or bone smashing, which again, he's not fully recommending. But I think my point's made that, this is a process that is ongoing and has seemingly no end in sight. Kind of yapping too long about this point, but I just find it interesting that Clav doesn't seem to recognize maybe the issue in the fact that you are striving towards an unobtainable goal, and he's very comfortable with not setting a goal. Maybe that makes it better for you. I don't know. Interested to hear what you guys think, but I digress. And this follows into him kind of talking about the Manosphere and also making fun of the Manosphere. For context, in case you don't recognize that Manosphere, think like Andrew Tate, that kind of person where it's like, women are lame and losers and men should rule the world kind of thing.
Relationship, right? So that's not like an anti-woman perspective, I think that's just a very like scientific reason for that. It's not just like the low IQ typical jester, oh like, you know, horror, because that's from the Manosphere, that's really like all that you get. Like just, you know, saying the word like whore, and it's like, if you're just gonna do that without, you know, giving any reason on why the promiscuity is bad, then you're just like a jester. It doesn't mean anything.
So I didn't give the entire context there, but they were talking about, Andrew was kind of prompting him about body count, and he was saying, you know, women should have a lower body count than men. He brings up pair bonding and the differences between men and women and how that attraction works and how that affects them long term. I don't know the science behind it. He believes that women experience that differently from men. I did some quick research on it, and it seems to be very subjective from research paper to research paper. There's implication that men are more able to sleep around than women, but there's also research that's pointing to the fact that it impacts them both long-term in equally negative ways. Not even necessarily the whole point, but you know, in that example there, he was bringing up that he thinks the Manosphere is lame because they just call women whores and that's about it. I find it interesting because there's a lot of things where Clav appears to be very shallow in his perception of a point that he's talking about. But even in this example, he's kind of pointing out that shallowness in other respects, like from the Manosphere. He's pointing out that, you know, they're saying that promiscuity is bad in women, but doesn't go into why. And if you're not going to explain the why, then you're just jester. You're just being foolish. You look like a clown. And I also agree with that aspect of it. Pretty based. If you're going to just make a claim and just have nothing to support it, kind of lame, especially when you're calling an entire gender super lame. So in that sense, I agree with him. Now this is bringing my highlights to a close here. We have this part of the interview and then one final one that's my favorite. But in this one, Clav brings up that he believes that sex hasn't always been for pleasure, and only recently has it really become a thing of pleasure that people do. And it just really caught me off guard how confident he was about this. So take a look.
No, because that's not what sex is intended for. Right? That's, yeah, like it's enjoyable to have sex with women, but that's not the intention behind it, and that was never meant to be. This is like a very new thing in the context of, you know, history, that people just have regular sex with random people for pure pleasure and then never talk to them again.
But weren't the ancient Romans on some like gay orgy vibes? And like samurais were on some gay.
Okay, first of all, it wasn't even really like Romans necessarily. It was more so the army, but like what's the relevance of that?
Well, you're talking about that people having sex for pleasure is a new thing, and that beforehand it was not used for that purpose.
I said generally.
Generally, got you.
But yeah, in terms of relationships, really, like just because like Roman soldiers who hadn't seen their wives and have no ability to see their wives, you know, were homosexual. That doesn't, you know, change what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. You know, they did that because they were unable to see
but it was
their wives.
Outliers back then. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it almost is like the same context as people in prison were not able to have sex with their wife.
What? This is such a bizarre. I think I understand a little bit that maybe he's talking about that. You know, kind of hookup culture and stuff has become a lot more prevalent. But to say that it is like a new thing that people are having sex for pleasure is mind blowing. Just for funsies, I looked up when were some of the first brothels kind of founded. 2400 BCE are the earliest recorded mention of prostitution as an occupation. These describe a temple brothel operated by Sumerian priests in the city of Uruk. Even in Kingdom Come Deliverance, they're showing bathhouses where they were also acting as a brothel. And those games try to be pretty historically accurate. Again, I think I understand the general idea, but it seems bastardized as he's just kind of, you know, again, taking a shallow stroke from this concept that promiscuity has gone up in recent years, and he's just kind of making an overgeneralization himself, which is kind of funny. But now this brings us into that finale that you guys had kind of seen pieces of, and my favorite part of this comes from Clavicular getting really mad with Andrew, and he starts, like going after him, saying, we haven't talked about Looksmaxxing at all, which they have. And he starts bringing up how, traditional media is trying to fuck with him and like all this stuff. And he starts pointing this at Andrew, seemingly because he's heard that this guy is with Channel 5, which is just the name of his YouTube channel. And I guess to save face, he starts trying to cope with the situation. And the results of that are really fucking funny.
You want me to ask you a scientific question about Looksmaxxing?
I just think it's kind of funny how that's really never been done with the amount of like media appearances.
Well, maybe people don't know you want to be asked that.
Well,
now they will.
Well, that's quite literally what a lot of your companies, your
What do you
press
mean, your companies? You think I work for like Time Warner or something?
your press companies, you work for Channel 5?
It's a YouTube channel called Channel 5.
I'm not sure.
I'm the CEO of my own company. I don't have any agenda to play here.
Holy semantics, dude. Like,
It's a pretty big difference between working for an affiliate news station like Channel 5, the TV company.
Well, way to diminish your channel, but once again, semantics.
Clavicular completely fucks up, just genuinely didn't do a lick of research, figure out this is just the name of the dude's YouTube channel. And when he clarifies that, when Andrew clarifies that for him, he goes, holy semantics, bro. First time I saw that, I was actually belly laughing. It was so fucking funny to me. Because like in any other situation, hey dude, I heard that you hate orphans. Oh, no. I was just clarifying there's this orphan that beat the shit out of me in an alleyway. And so I really don't like that guy and noticed that he was holy fucking semantics, bro. Shut the fuck up. I feel like there's a big difference between like, well, technically, that's incorrect versus like, you are so clearly wrong and you're making a generalization and an assumption that I'm here on somebody else's agenda when it's just me. Like I am Channel 5. I'm the one dude. I found that so fucking funny. And shortly after this, he ends up, tweaking and ends up crashing out. I was like, all right, well, I guess this interview's over. These were just some of my personal favorite highlights from this. I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. And like I said earlier, I will be doing a fully in-depth video talking about Clavicular, learning about more of the Looksmaxxing stuff, his earlier life and how he kind of got into this. If you enjoyed this video and checking this out in the highlights with me, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you want to stick around for more content, and I'll catch you guys later. Adios. Peace. Bye.